Now, this morning's going to be a little different from previous sessions because in most songs, in all the songs we've done so far, we've had lyrics to work from to kind of orient ourselves to where we are in the song and what's going on. Because this is an instrumental, on the other hand, I'm not going to play the whole thing first. I'm going to instead play little snippets of it. And let me first start by just playing a little bit of one recording of David Eby playing it on the cello, so you can kind of remember, if you've heard the melody before, you can kind of hear what the melody is like and kind of remind yourself which song it is we're listening to. Let me pause that. So we're going to end up taking it phrase by phrase, and I'm actually going to talk whilst the music is playing some of the time. And we'll enjoy the full track toward the end. Well, at the end of this session, I'll play the full track so you can enjoy it non-stop. So Sailing the Blue Sea, again, which is the opening piece off of Mystic Harp 2, is like many tracks on those albums, including the Mystic Harp, which is the predecessor. It's an entirely instrumental piece with nothing but the melody and the arrangement of the instruments to really communicate its consciousness and its message. And so without lyrics, we need to explore it phrase by phrase and hear the different aspects of the music and what it's communicating. Now, we can get some clues first from the very title of the song. These are the few words that we have to work with. So first of all, we have sailing. Now, sailing means to let the wind carry you. And you're not running on a ship, in nautical terms, you're not running under your own power either with an engine or with oars. You're entirely dependent upon the wind to carry you where you need to go. The crew, the passengers, the pilot, everybody like that has to be dependent on it. And spiritually speaking, sailing is very much a clear reference to surrendering that desire to be in control and surrendering into the hands of the divine wind and letting God guide your life. The blue sea then, moreover, implies a scope that's quite expansive and open, and you might also say one that poses certain risks of having storms come up or really losing your way because there's no reference points out on the open sea, and even venturing into uncharted territories like in medieval times when they had those maps that said, "Here be dragons" off the edge of the map. And by sailing then, we're allowing or giving ourselves into the risks of that kind of a journey, and again with our complete dependence on the wind. But this piece overall is very soothing and warming. It's like you're being gently stroked and smoothed over. There's really no harshness in the song, nothing like you would say to cause irritation as that quality goes. In fact, Swami Ananda in Secrets of Emotional Healing, Day 22, assigned this song to the quality of irritation, writing thus, and hear how he even uses some oceanic metaphors. He says, "The secret of overcoming irritation is to view life in terms of its longer rhythms, not the fleeting ripples of pleasure and pain, but the broad waves of long-term loyalties, and not emotional commitments merely, but the great swells of dedication to high aims in life." So let's see how that song works for this quality and some of the other ones that I mentioned, how it touches the spine and leads to those high aims. And you might say that sailing the blue sea, implies a journey of some kind that passes through some distinct stages, and that's what we really hear in the piece, again with the different instrumentation. So let me go to the beginning of that song on the Mystic Harp, and this is just a first little introduction that you'll hear. It's about 17 seconds long, that has some beautiful arpeggiating waves on the harp, the kind of music or kind of sound that's often used in symphonies and other performances as a kind of angelic or astral effect. In fact, you hear this also at the end of Song of the Nightingale that we did a few weeks ago, that's on the Windows on the World album. And then there's a few snatches of preview to the main melody, and ends with a few high bells or sparkles and the addition of some slow background strings that provides a very smoothing and warming presence. So let's listen to that part here first. Okay, the main melody is going to start right after that. But I wanted to stop here because oftentimes when we have little preludes like this in a song, it might be a piano prelude or a guitar prelude or something, we often just kind of let it go or dismiss it, thinking that, well, this is just kind of a warm-up for the main event of the song, if the singing starts or the main melody begins or something like that. But truly, in all of Swami Kriyananda's music, I can't think of a time where those introductions are just a throwaway or just like an afterthought or something that's not there without purpose. And really, in this case, if you listen carefully, you hear those arpeggiations are really beginning that soothing process, saying that something magically, you might say, is about to happen. Those little bits of melody are teasing us with something that's also trying to happen. And I like to think of those sparkles as, we speak of the Christ consciousness, the indwelling Christ consciousness, as the spark of the divine in the heart of every atom. And those sparkles are a way of reminding us that that's there. And in fact, we're kind of drawing on that Christ consciousness into the whole body. And it's like those sparkles, which are dynamic and living, unlike, when we think of a spark, we think of something maybe more static or something singular. But these are very rich, and it's like the whole body is being touched. All the nerves in the body are being touched in a good way to kind of awaken them in meaningful preparation for the consciousness that's coming in the rest of the song. And that's part, I think, of the antidote for irritation, is touching all those nerves that often get irritated with something a little more divine, as something with a little more light. To put it another way, to put it a little more yogically, you might say, is that the beginning of this song really begins with, I'd say, the star in the spiritual eye, the Christ consciousness at the center of the spiritual eye, from which the energy then expands and opens up to meet us and invite us. And it reminds me of that account given by Kashi Moni in chapter 37 of Autobiography of a Yogi. She was the wife of Lahiri Mahashai, and she was about to receive Kriya Yoga, and describes Lahiri touching her on the forehead and having, she says, these masses of whirling light appear, gradually forming into the star and the blue of the spiritual eye and the gold ring around it. And at that moment, Lahiri tells her, penetrate your consciousness through the star into the kingdom of the infinite, which is really a direction given to all of us as devotees to penetrate that star. And so in cooperation with that, the Christ consciousness there in that star doesn't just sit and wait for us to kind of make our way there. It reaches out and embraces us. And that, to me, is the expanding sound in the song of these sparkles expanding into that blue field of the spiritual eye, which is indeed a blue sea. And that's really the sailing, the blue sea that we're going to be sailing on here now as we start the real melody. So let me back up just a little bit so we can catch that. All right. So now this primary melody begins, clearly resonating with the heart chakra. We're seeing the blue sea opening, and our willingness to sail and to explore is how we respond. With this warm, soothing, and inviting sound, we get in our boat, and we sail, and we relax into the wind. I'm going to come back to this pause. Let this first phrase finish. So we've gotten our boat and we started sailing, and again, we're sailing under the power of the wind. We're allowing ourselves to be carried on by the winds of grace, represented, I think, by those slow strings going on in the background. And we don't have to push, all we have to do is cooperate. But there's that little pause you heard in the melody where the wind isn't quite blowing as constantly as it is, and as much as we think it should be. And that's a moment in this piece that gives us pause to wonder whether we need to be ambitious and try to take control. It's tempting us to do that. But really the answer is no. We just need to relax into the wind, cooperate with it, cooperate with grace, cooperate with God's love, and see where that goes. But really that pause there is important because it reflects the times on the spiritual path when we don't seem to be moving at the same or the expected rate. When we feel like, are we really making spiritual progress? And it's those times we're really tempted to assert the ego and try to drive more and try to sort of take control of our lives and push toward some kind of a goal. But really the answer is always to relax. relax into the rhythms and the cycles as mentioned in that Secrets of Emotional Healing, and release the expectation that spiritual awakening is going to happen on a schedule or happen according to some predetermined or known plan. And in fact, if you look at the basic lessons in meditation of practicing the Hong Sa technique, the first step of that is complete relaxation. And this song is really helping remind us to do that. And now, the next phrase, the primary melody, repeats again. And having relaxed into that flow, the energy rises from the heart to the throat chakra, being helped by those little high bells you're hearing in the background. And because we've given ourselves into that understanding of flow and not to worry, it's easier this time. And that pause right there is a little slower, it's easier, it's subtler, it's shorter. Like that decision to relax into the longer rhythms isn't quite so hard. And now we hear a secondary melody, which is a little more forceful or challenging. Energy in the spine is rising from the throat to the medulla, and we hear those slow strings have faded a little bit, which is to say the wind is diminished or even died out. You can hear that there now. Let me pause it. So that wind, those slow strings are diminishing and dying out, and it's challenging us to, with the potentially irritating situation, you might say, where we're thinking, well, without the wind, what's going to happen to us? Was it the right decision to surrender into the flow if the flow kind of stops happening? And is this not, again, time to assert my control and try to assert my power and take control of everything? You might say this phrase is what is called the doldrums. In nautical terms, the doldrums are areas, I think they're near the equator, where there would just be no wind. And if you're in a sailing ship, as people did in that time, you were stuck. You had nowhere to go. You had no oars, you had no engine. If there was no wind, your ship just sat there. And this could be a real crisis for the crew if they were low on food and low on fresh water. And really the water got stagnant, the air got really kind of thick and stagnant. It was really kind of a miserable situation. And, you can think of the doldrums are that period of doubt in the spiritual journey where we wonder if our sailing, our surrendering into that divine wind was really a good idea. And maybe we should have brought a backup. Maybe we should have something in our back pocket. It's like that story, Two Penniless Boys in Brindaban, again, an autobiography of a yogi, where Yogananda's friend Jitendra asked Yogananda's brother Ananda, say, could you give us at least a couple rupees as a safeguard in case things go wrong? And Yogananda emphatically said, no, I am not going to take any money as a final safeguard in this divine test here. And he's showing us that attitude that we have to take too with potentially getting stuck. So the melody again is asking us, do you want to take charge? Do you think you know what's best? And that's that energetic, more forceful melody that's going on, like the agitation or the irritation we might feel when things aren't going, again, quite as expected. But the answer is never to get all worked up and to try to take charge. It's to rather relax back into calmness and ask simply, well, Divine Mother, what do you have in mind? You might remember that story Swami Kriyananda tells using that phrase of where he landed in Calcutta, and the people who were going to meet him weren't there. They were stuck in heavy traffic. But the moment he asked that question, another man approached him who was a friend of another friend he was hoping to meet. And through him, he was able to meet his friend who was actually staying in Calcutta and was able to spend the night with his friend, Dr. Mishra, which was fortunate because all the hotel rooms were taken in Calcutta that night. I had a similar experience, too, coming back from, we had a little work party at the Ananda Center in Rhode Island, I think it was 2001 or so. And 3 of us that were from the Seattle community were coming back, flying from Providence to Chicago to Seattle. And there were thunderstorms, as there usually is in the springtime in Chicago, and so our plane was delayed, and we sat out on the tarmac for a couple of hours, and finally they decided, well, we're just going to have to reroute everybody, so they brought the plane back, unloaded us all, and we were standing in line at the agent desk waiting to make our arrangements, and there was a woman in front of us who was just irritated to all extent that you could be, and just agitated and incensed at this outrage. And then she was demanding that she get her luggage off of that plane because she's not going to go anywhere without her luggage. She wants her luggage off so she can get on the next flight and not be separated from her luggage. And, it's really worked up like that. And, the three of us were just sitting there observing this and, kind of being in that space rather of saying, Divine Mother, what do you have in mind? And what was so ironic is that, with her insistence, the gate agent called out to the people at the gate. They got her luggage off. The moment her luggage was off that plane, we got the announcement that we were cleared for takeoff. We all got back on and flew to Chicago, and she was left behind. So it was a really ironic thing, but a great part of this moment. But now when we ask that question, let me go now to the next phrase in the song again, where the second melody is repeating. When we ask that question, we let the energy from the medulla release, where the ego is trying to control the situation, allow it to flow up to the spiritual eye, and we start having fun. We relax into the flow as the wind and the strings pick up again in a new and stronger way, indicating that joy of surrendering to God, carrying us forward on the next leg of the journey. And now we have this beautiful little interlude where the energy is flowing up toward the spiritual eye. And we realize that sailing is not the same as drifting, that our sailing on the blue sea, and I need to pause it here. The sailing on the blue sea has been purposeful and directional from the start, guided by that star of Christ consciousness in the spiritual eye, drawing us toward union with God. And that interlude is saying, you've come to this point, you've surrendered, now let everything go. You're sailing on the sea away from the shore and away from all your concerns. And it's time now to be at peace. And then we kick in, let me back it up just slightly here so you can hear it. It just goes back into the primary melody. Here it goes. But now we're an octave up from where we were originally, which feels like we're trying to get to the spiritual eye, and it's chipping away at the medulla, chipping away at the ego, not just lifting the heart, but really working all of that for that final release. And toward the end of this phrase, we're going to hear an upward movement of the melody that we think is going to come to a point of completion, so listen for it here. So there's that question. There's a pause there where it's not going into completion because there's a chord that's left unresolved. And it's like we're pausing to ask that question, can we release the ego? Having come up to the doorway of the spiritual eye, having sailed that blue sea, we're coming to the star, and our choice is now, do we really penetrate it? Do we fully offer ourselves into the divine, or do we turn away? There's that little bit of uncertainty here. But as devotees, of course, we step through. And then what happens again is we get this primary melody back. We relax fully upwards into the spiritual eye. All the spine is coming upwards. Those slow strings are strong, signifying that union with God. And the whole experience of sailing now is just divinely directed. The strings are warm and soothing to the whole body, especially the nervous system. And there's a resolution we hear at the end here. Coming up again. And we hear that resolution. Now, oftentimes in a performance, the song can stop there, but the recording here on Mystic Harp 2 gives us actually something more, which I think is really fun. And we hear this little interlude again, with beautiful light bells, that sparkle of the Christ consciousness, along with waves and shorebirds, as we hear, like on the Land of Mystery, pieces on music to awaken superconsciousness, that album. Just like we've gone past the blue sea into the great ocean of spirit, into the waves of Om. Now, let me pause there. And sailing on this new ocean in union with God now is what we're doing. We're past the blue sea into that great ocean of spirit. And yet, even though we're tempted to think that this little part, we could end the song here again, but we go back to the primary melody once more. Now this time the harp is in the background, and we hear this other instrument which Derek Bell plays called the oboe d'amore. It's a very special instrument that's not known very well, and we have these high sparkly bells going on. And Derek Bell plays this instrument on a lot of the Mystic Harp recordings, and it's typically expressive of the soul or of higher consciousness or the divine speaking to us from the spiritual eye. Most of the recordings have it like that. And in this particular phrase, we're now just fully giving in and sailing with God, and we feel this great vitality through our entire being, physically, emotionally, mentally and spiritually. The transformed feelings of the heart are flowing up, the released ego is flowing up, and it's touching all those nerves, every part of the body with that deep, soothing feeling, again overcoming those qualities like agitation and irritation. And then to close the song here, we finally have one more pass through the melody with the oboe d'amore here smoothing out the nerves even more. And it will end fairly soon here with just a profound peacefulness where we rest fully into that divine peace, knowing that for certain we've come home, that we're done with all striving, all effort, all need to be in control, and even all movement, allowing ourselves to rest into that silence and stillness forever. So clearly, again, as we've been discussing, this song is wonderful as an antidote for irritation, along in with nervousness, agitation, restlessness, anxiety. Anytime you feel emotions like that, pull this song out and just try to feel that soothing going on. Feel yourself being drawn up into that divine union where there's nothing to be worried about because you are one with everything. And like I said a number of times, it releases that desire to be in control, that metaphor of sailing, of giving ourselves into the hands of the divine. It really helps, especially desire to control one's destiny, you might say. God knows what's best. The masters know what's best. You can give yourself into that. And in that way, because you release the expectations of control, it also helps to help remove anger, which comes from your expectations being thwarted, and also just relieve stress in general, because the origin of stress is not in the circumstances that we encounter, but in our reactions to them, and especially our desire to control those circumstances, which is the desire to control the world around you. The problem, though, is that you can't really control the world because there's 7 billion other people who are trying to control it to their advantage at the same time. And so it's really a hopeless cause. The right solution is to release that desire to control everything, to relax into whatever's trying to happen, to stop your typical emotional reactions, to breathe, to calm yourself, and then ask that question, well, Divine Mother, what do you have in mind? And then as she starts to respond, you can choose how you cooperate and respond with that. And when you involve God, it's often just the simple choice to respond to and cooperate with the loving invitations and the gifts that God is presenting us in those situations, to give ourselves into the wind and sail forward into that blue sea once again. So now let's enjoy that song from the beginning all the way through and try to feel more deeply again everything that we've discussed.